Hi, everyone. This is Charina here and Charlie, and thank you for joining us, our Chatting with Charlie, where we talk about the January 2025 Visa Bulletin. How are you doing, Charlie?
Great. I hope that everybody's going to have happy holidays.
I know, I think we will, because based on the Visa Bulletin, there has been some movement. So let's walk through it. As we go through the dates for filing, Charlie, have we seen any changes for the employment base?
No, there haven't been any changes. And I think we previously mentioned it. I wouldn't expect any changes, at least until the summer. They may make some advancements in the summer to start generating demand for the coming fiscal year 2026. But again, typically they make the major changes for the October bulletin and then kind of leave them alone unless there's some drastic need for numbers.
Yeah, and the biggest change that the government did was most recently they announced that they will reject any 485s or adjustment of status that there isn't a medical submitted. So we recommend, start looking for getting your medical done because they don't expire so that when the dates for filing actually start moving, your case is ready to go. And Charlie, as you mentioned, the importance of submitting all the documents so that it's adjudication ready, right?
Yes, this is a really good thing because somebody can file based on the application filing dates. In theory, USCIS would start adjudicating that case, even though it's not within the final action dates. Once they finalize action, they can request a visa number, and having that medical means they can request that visa number. That way, it'll be available as soon as the final action date moves and allows final action. This change in policy is actually very good for the applicant.
Yeah, and I think what we're gonna see is that the government may be approving the more recent cases filed than the later cases filed because they have to issue requests for evidence and things like that. So, big tip is to make sure you submit your medicals and start getting your medicals done so that you can be ready once the dates for filing move for your case. And let's talk about the final action dates. So, some good news, we see some movement, right, Charlie? What's going on here?
Yeah, I think this is excellent movements. As I kind of been predicting, it appears they are going to be doing the major changes in the dates on a quarterly basis, January being the start of the second quarter. We saw for employment second, third, and the employment third other worker categories, we saw nice movements in all the categories, which is encouraging, especially in the EB2 rest of world, which finally moved after being held for
Yeah.
7 months. Movements in these categories for worldwide are pretty much on par with what I said the average movements would be over time.
Yeah, so it moved about 2 weeks, right, for EB2 all chargeability, and then a couple weeks also for EB3 all chargeability. So positive things, but I don't know necessarily if it's gonna move again. We'll talk about those in Charlie's predictions. But let's move on to China. And okay, Charlie, EB1 didn't move, but then we see some movement about a month for EB2. And then EB3 jumped a bit from April to June. So what do you think's going on there?
With the second, it is pretty much on matches are the predictions. It is nice that it moved a month. In China third preference, it did have the major jump from April to June. This is slightly more than the average I predicted, but it's very encouraging. This would kind of indicate that the demand for numbers in the China third preference with earlier dates is subsiding somewhat. The actual number use is not as great as they anticipated, which has allowed this larger movement, which again is a very good thing.
Do you think it'll jump up to September 2020 where it was in September 2024? Because it's still a few months behind.
I would not be surprised that for April, I don't know if it would move ahead again in March or February or March, but I would hope that it may get back to there by April or definitely by May.
Okay. And then if we move on to India, EB1 again hasn't moved since July. And then EB2 jumps up significantly from August to October. And then we see also some significant movement in EB3 India. So, some thoughts on that?
Yeah, again, very nice, significant movement in EB2 and reasonable 3 week movement in EB3 as well. Again, encouraging. and on par with their quarterly movements. They're figuring they only need to move it now, and it's likely that they may hold the date for February and or March.
Okay. And then if we look at the predictions, let's see what's your predictions for the employment-based final action movement. And these are your predictions that are estimated average monthly movement through April 2025. So what are we looking at for EB1?
It's for EB1, rest of world, it's current. And these predictions, I think they're matching what has happened in the start of the second quarter. Until I see some changes, these are going to remain consistent, and I'm confident in these, especially with their quarterly movement of the dates. May need to make some type of adjustment on these as we enter the second half of the fiscal year.
Okay, so you're thinking that January, February, March, the dates will probably stay the same, not much movement?
I think for people planning, assume that for February and March, the dates will remain pretty much the same. And then you can be pleasantly surprised if, for example, in the China EB2, that it does move 2 weeks for February or March. You can be pleasantly surprised,
Okay.
but don't be surprised then if it doesn't move for February and March, then April, it might move, say, 4 to 6 weeks. And again, this is what we've been seeing in the dates. There was really minimal movement in the November and December dates, and then the big jump for January to March to match these predictions. If demand is a little bit lower than expected, if they see it coming in for January, it's a little low, or the remainder of December, then we might get lucky and they might move the date a little bit for the month of February. But again, I always feel that it's better for people to be pleasantly surprised with the movements instead of being disappointed on a potentially unreasonable expectation.
Yeah, and then if we move to our family-based, what are we seeing there?
Family based, except for the 2A category, we saw very nice movements in the family first, family 2B, family third, family fourth held. There has been no movement in that family fourth for 7 months, which seems a little bit strange that they're still having so much backlog demand. Whereas in the family first and the family 2B category, they moved the dates which had been held for the previous 6 months. So again, it's a little bit concerning that there was no movement in the fourth. Hopefully, we'll see that. And then hopefully, we will be seeing somewhat steady forward movement in the family dates as we move February on.
Yeah, we get a lot of questions about the F2A and whether when it's gonna move, so I know we've not seen it move very much, right, in the couple months.
Yeah, I think the 2A category, at one time we were seeing people, when I was working, we were seeing people kind of delay action on their cases in the 2A. I think that the fact that the date retrogressed at one point and then there was the establishment of the date, I think people are a lot more proactive in finalizing action on their cases in the 2A category and maybe the other categories as well. So that could limit. Plus, the category, it is a very popular category. So there is a little bit more emphasis on people finalizing their action in the 2A category.
And then as we close out, let's talk about the number use. And so our annual limits we're seeing here 140,338, 2016, and then 2020, 156, 253, and then also impacted the actual number use because of COVID. And so any changes here? Has the report come out yet from Department of State?
No, they haven't published anything regarding the 2024 number use. I would have expected at least Table 5, which is the table with worldwide number use, both overseas and adjustment of status. I would hope that they release that information and post it sometime during the month of December. They have the data. It's just a matter of having the time and staff to compile it and post it. But I would hope that Table 5 does get posted on the State Department website sometime in the next 2 weeks or so. It'll be interesting to see that, but for now, I would estimate that the employment limit for 2025 will be approximately 150,000. It could be as low as 145,000. In theory, it should be closer to the 145,000 because the State Department should have been able to maximize number use in the family sponsored category. And the employment limit is a minimum of 140,000 plus any unused family numbers from the previous year.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm assuming for now, until I see something, that there are going to be 10,000 unused family numbers rolling over for employment use.
Okay, so we'll see by the next chatting with Charlie if that information was published. So, as the new administration comes in, what can we expect to happen or any changes with the Visa Bulletin?
There should be no impact. The numerical limits are established by the Immigration Nationality Act. As we saw in the previous slide that showed number use 2016 through 2020, which would encompass the Trump administration in the previous term, there was no negative impact on number use versus the annual limits. So I don't think anybody should be concerned at this point.
Okay. And then we'll just have to wait and see once his administration starts what sort of changes he's going to implement, which will impact maybe the Visa Bulletin in terms of processing times and things like that. But we'll just have to wait and see, right?
Right. And again, the historic pattern from his previous administration, there were no major negative impacts in number use versus the amount of numbers available. So that is an encouraging sign going forward.
Okay. So we'll have to just wait and see in the new year. So the next chatting with Charlie we'll be having next month will probably be before the inauguration, is my guess, right, Charlie?
Yes.
Well, the Visa Bulletin will probably come out before January 20th. So maybe we'll have the same news or maybe we'll have more news. But thank you, Charlie. I think it's been a year since we've been doing these chatting with Charlies, and it's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
And have a great holiday, everyone, and a great new year.